Take two. All right. Thanks for joining everybody tonight. I'm Mike Amico from OM System. I'm a technical account manager for North America, and I'll be helping out tonight answering some tech questions in the background while Peter Baumgarten, our beloved ambassador here, will be doing a nice presentation for you all on the new beautiful OM-3 camera and all the new lenses as well. So if you want to ask any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'll do my best to get through them as well as Peter's presentation, where he'll go through the camera. He'll do also some technical answering, I'm sure, throughout. And if there's anything we can't get to, we'll get to those at the end of the presentation as well. So thank you again for joining us for this. We appreciate you coming. It's very exciting to have a new camera, and this camera is absolutely beautiful. It's a really nice looking camera, and it's also a very capable camera. So, with that said, I'm going to let Peter take it away. Peter, thanks, for doing this for us, and for everybody out there, we always appreciate it. And I'll let you take over. I'm going to go ahead and go right to the background here. So, go
All
ahead.
right, just don't go to sleep, Mike.
I
All
won't.
right.
I'll be here. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Peter.
So thanks for that introduction, Mike, and thanks to Adorama for hosting this event. I want to get into my presentation fairly quickly here, so let me share my screen. And welcome to all of you. I heard that we've got people from all over the place for this presentation. And let me just a second here. Oh, share. There we go. All right, here we go. I couldn't find the play button for a second. There we go. All right, so today's all about the OM-3 and my experiences with it, plus a little bit of technical stuff thrown in. When OM System reached out to me, 5, 6 weeks ago, probably still in December, asking if I was interested in testing out the new OM-3, I said, of course. I was quite excited about the prospect of testing out the new camera until the person on the other side, the OM System person that I was speaking to, said, well, it's designed for urban creators. And I looked at them, ready to ask a question that I knew they had the answer to. Do you guys know where I live? Because I don't live anywhere close to a city to do urban photography. I live in a very small town of about 400 people on a very large island that is covered in farms, forests, fields, and at this time of the year, a lot of frozen lakes as well. This is at the top of Lake Huron in Canada, here in Ontario. And I wasn't too sure that I'd be able to handle some urban photography under those conditions, because if you know my work at all, I am primarily a landscape photographer. I certainly love to travel and get to locations that I don't have around here. Of course, most of my landscape photography is more local, and when that beautiful sun sets, I turn my attention to the night sky because, like I said, I live in a remote area. It's also a dark sky area, and so it's very easy for me to get shots like this. I'm actually looking forward to getting out and doing some astro shooting, including with the OM-3. And when I'm not shooting those two subjects, landscapes and night sky stuff, I also turn my camera towards wildlife photography, which I do whenever the opportunity presents itself. Now, I'm not a complete novice when it comes to urban photography. Of course, in my travels, I definitely have had opportunities to photograph, cityscapes and city architecture and that kind of thing. And of course, some people shots, some street photography stuff as well, some iconic buildings. This is coming to you out of New York right now from where Adorama is. And so there's, the Flatiron building there or the Golden Gate Bridge. So, I'm definitely capable, I think, of doing some uh, urban photography. The problem is I live nowhere near that, and I had no intentions of traveling. So I said to them, "Are you sure you want me to be shooting with this camera?" And they said, "Well, we trust that you'll be able to create some good images." And that, of course, made me feel good that they had faith in what I would be able to do with the new gear. And of course, at that point, I didn't have it yet. Uh, but anyway, I was not going to say no, so I got the camera, and I've absolutely fallen in love with it. It is a fantastic piece of tech. And so before we get into sort of my shots and some of the images that I've been able to create with it, let's truly have a first look at it, at its design and features. And I know that we've already got lots of questions about this, so maybe I'll answer some of these now, and if not, Mike will be able to hopefully tackle some of those. As far as design goes, there is no doubt where its ancestry comes from. It is very, very similar in design to the original OM-1, and that camera that you see on the left is my OM-1. It's actually the OM-1N that I started shooting with when I was 12 years old. And so that's about 50 years old, and the OM-3 is brand new, not even 5 weeks I've had it, I think. But if we want to look at what's under the hood, I think a far better comparison would be with the OM-1 Mark II, which I've been shooting with now for, I think, over a year. And there are a lot of similarities. Of course, there are some differences as well. So I'm going to run down some of those. I know that I'm not going to get to all of them. So if you have some specific questions, you can throw that in the chat. As far as the sensor goes, the OM-1 Mark II has that 20 megapixel stacked backside illuminated sensor, and so does the OM-3. It's exactly the same sensor. Right, the processor is the TruePic 10 dual quad-core processor, and the OM-3 is exactly the same processor as well. So, you know, they are at the heart of them, very, very similar. The image stabilization system, 8.5 stops you get with the Mark II, and you almost get that with the OM-3. So not quite, but, you know, you can hardly say, well, you only get 7.5 stops. I can remember when we were drooling over that not that long ago, because I think that's what the OM-1 gets. The OM-1 Mark II gets a slightly better image stabilization, but that is still incredibly respectable. Weatherproofing, IP53 rated. Right, it'll handle almost anything Mother Nature throws at it, and so does the OM-3, which is a really great rugged. It's a ruggedly built camera. You can feel it when you pick it up that it has a really rugged build to it. Right, focusing, same thing. Right, that phase detection, image contrast, 1,053 points. So does the OM-3. And then finally, in my chart, anyway, as far as sequential shooting goes, the OM-1 Mark II will shoot up to 10 frames per second, and electronic 120 frames per second. The OM-3 will get up to 6 frames per second mechanical, but still 120 frames per second. And even 6 frames per second is still quite respectable. And if that doesn't suit your needs, then you know you can get it all the way up to 120 frames per second. And even with the Mark II, I never shoot 120 frames per second. I have maxed out with wildlife at 60 frames per second. All right, so that's what I've got charted there. But there are a few other things that just off the top. They use the same battery, thank goodness. The Mark II has 2 card slots. The OM-3 has 1. For some people, that might be a deal breaker. Certainly wouldn't be for me. But, you know, and there are probably a few other things that we might get to, or that if you didn't hear, again, throw that in the chat. All right, let's now take an actual tour of the exterior of this camera. What a beautiful design this thing is. First thing you might notice, although it's a little subtle, but on the mode dial, we've got an extra custom mode. So there's 5 custom modes here, which a lot of people will appreciate, being able to program certain features that they use a lot. And then, of course, to make room for that, they knocked out the video mode, and it's now over on its own dial. So you've got a stills and video dial out on the left. So most of the time I'm shooting stills. If I want to shoot sort of regular video, I click it over to the video camera there. And then there's this S&Q, which is slow and quick motion video. Now, I'm not much of a video shooter, but I do have one clip to show you later. All right, so there's the top. If we move to the back, looks pretty typical of the way Olympus and OM System have designed their cameras. The one thing that I was so pleased with is the relocation of the menu button back here within thumb's reach. You know, when I'm shooting, I want my right-hand thumb to be able to press almost any button that I want. And for a number of years, the menu button has been on the right-hand side top, or sorry, the left-hand side top left. And so I really appreciate that. While I'm talking menu, it has the same menu as the OM-1 and the Mark II. which is fantastic. It is a great menu design. It's very intuitive. It's easy to find stuff. Color coded. I love the menu system that they came up when the OM-1 came in, and the OM-3 has exactly the same menu and also includes the My menu. So if there's certain things that you use quite regularly, you can save them in My menu and then quickly access those things that you want in there. Right. If you don't like how the buttons are assigned, then you can assign whatever you'd like to them. I think almost all the buttons are reprogrammable. And if there's certain features that you are used to seeing in a particular location, then you can assign whatever function you want to it. So that's quite useful. All right. So that's a great change, but it's a pretty sort of minor change. Functionality, it's great. But the big change for me is the CP button. I absolutely love it. Of course, CP stands for computational photography. And so I press that button, and that gives me access to the computational features, things that I use all the time. If you've seen my work or seen previous presentations, you know that I love using a lot of the comp stuff. And so when you press that button, this is what pops up on the LCD. You've got a variety of the different computational modes easily accessed. So I'll just zoom in here a little bit. You've got quick access to the two high-res modes. You've got the tripod and the handheld high-res modes, so easy to turn those off and on. If you are in shutter priority or shooting manual, then these are accessible, the live ND. It does go all the way up to ND64. You can't see that with this screenshot that I've got, but the next one over after ND32 would be ND64. And then right beside that is definitely one of my favorite live or comp features, live GND. And in this case, let's say I select GND2, as you can see here. Once I let go of the CP button, I can then also change the hardness of the gradation, right? GND, graduated neutral density filter. Talk about that more in a second. But I can switch between soft, medium, and hard there. And then we've got the focus stacking, which is another feature that I use a lot in my landscape photography. And when you hold the CP button down, I think it's for 2 seconds. Mike can correct me if I'm wrong, but I kind of tested it. I think if you hold it for 2 seconds, boom, you're into the focus stacking menu so that you can adjust the number of shots or the focus differential. It still maxes out at 15, but under most circumstances, I've never needed more than 15, whether I'm shooting macro images of bugs or mushrooms, and definitely I never use more than 15 for my landscape shooting. All right, and then the final computational features that are accessible through that button are the 2 HDR modes, and those will give you raw images, and then of course the multiple exposure. So with one press of the button and then moving the front or back dial, you have access to 6 computational modes. And I use this all the time. It is so convenient. Honestly, this alone is worth the price of admission. The instant I pick up my OM-1, I'm missing this feature. I love it. The only feature that isn't accessible, only comp feature that's not accessible, is live comp, right? Live composite, which is the oldest of all of the computational modes. And if you're an OM system shooter or Olympus, you've already got that on your camera, and it's still accessible through the bulb mode, the B on the mode dial, right? But it really is so easy to access and adjust. All right, now onto the front, which of course you've seen many times in images, is that wonderful creative dial that you've got there. And of course that harkens back to the Pen F. But this is a much better camera under the hood, much more advanced camera under the hood, but I believe it operates. I mean, I have a Pen F, but I haven't shot with it in a while. I think it's got everything that the Pen F has, and it's got a slightly different location on the camera body, but it's an absolutely fantastic feature, and I'm going to talk a lot more about that in a few minutes. All right, time to go out and do some shooting. So when they asked me if I wanted to shoot with it, of course I said yes. It took probably 4 or 5 days for me to get it because even overnight express is never overnight when you live in the remote north here. And even though I was supposed to shoot sort of urban shots, I thought, okay, I just got to get used to the camera. So it's time to just go out and do the kind of shooting that I'm used to doing and see how this camera behaves. So the first thing I did was head to the south shore of the island on which I live and just did a little bit of kind of landscape, tried to find a few little human elements in there too. So this is a range light that we have on the South Shore. If you take the ferry to the island in the summer, it drives right past or floats right past this range light. And so I spent the first morning shooting with it here. And that previous shot was captured with the 17 millimeter f1.8, that new version of it, weather sealed, fantastic, sharp, small, beautiful little lens. Then I switched over to the 25 millimeter f1.8, really nice lenses that work really well with this camera. And then I'm still in the same location, just found a different spot here to shoot. And in order to put myself in the image, I use the interval shooting. So it's got the built-in intervalometer, or you can use the custom timer to capture shots like this where you can't be at the camera in order to trigger it. Right. The next morning, I decided to stick a little closer to home. This is about a 2-minute walk. I live right on the shore, so when I look out my front window, I see a beautiful bay. And so just down the hill is this sort of historic part of the tiny little town in which I live, and I decided I would photograph there. Looked like it was going to be a really nice sunrise. And again, I'm kind of still in landscape shooting mode, even if it's a little urban-ish, right? This is a shot with the 17. And then I decided, okay, well, the sunset looks like it's about to peek over the horizon. I need to get into position in a better spot than I was. And I decided I would put myself right where those pilings are. So there used to be an old dock there. And so I walked over to that location and then captured the sunrise. And it was a really spectacular sunrise. You don't usually see sundogs like you do here in this shot. But it was a pretty cold morning as well. And so for this image, again, I used that CP button, called up the live GND, and used that feature to quickly add that sort of graduated neutral density filter look to this shot. So if you're not familiar with live GND, I'll give you a quick rundown here. Without a GND filter on it, your image would look more like this, right? You've got the sky blown out a little bit. You've got a darker foreground because what the camera is searching for is middle gray. And in order to do that, it lightens the sky, darkens the foreground. And so, you know, traditionally we would stick a graduated neutral density filter in front of the lens to darken the sky and balance the exposure a little bit more. But now with just a press of the button, boom, I now call up the live GND. You can see that I'm using the GND 4 stop, and I've got the gradation set at medium. And you can see where I've placed the grad right at the horizon. But of course, I can adjust that however I would like. I can move it farther down depending on the image that I'm trying to capture. I can put it on an angle. If I've got a sloped horizon that I want to use. It's a really great feature, and I use it all the time. It's just one less piece of glass that I have to put on it. And let's face it, with smaller lenses like the 17 or the 25 or some of the other lenses that I use, I wouldn't even have a holder for a piece of glass. So this is great. I can use this feature with any lens that I want, right? So I love that for all kinds of shooting, mainly landscapes. Right now, after that sunrise, I decided to head to this waterfall. So this is about a 45-minute drive away from my house. And when I got there, the sun was fully up, but I got it peeking through the trees here. This waterfall freezes solid in the winter, but a few weeks ago when I was shooting it, it hadn't quite reached that. It's totally solid right now. And then I pulled back a little bit and I decided to get more of a classic landscape style shot that I use. And for this one, used focus stacking. So again, hit that CP button, boom, dial in the focus stacking. I think I used 6 shots here because I really wanted to focus in on the frost that you see there. The really frosty morning here, got a little bit of sunlight coming through the mist generated by this waterfall, and shot this with the 8 to 25. Now, when I'm shooting landscapes and I'm using focus stacking, I typically set it up for about 6 or 8 shots, and then I will use focus stacking to generate a JPEG because focus stacking will generate a stacked JPEG, but all of the images that go into the stack are raw images, and so then I can use those raw images to merge those together in post, and that just gives me a little bit more control. But I love having that JPEG that I can use for reference while I'm out in the field shooting. All right, so now I've had the camera for a few days. It's time to do some urban shooting, but I'm still not, I can't quite fit a city shoot into my schedule. So to be honest, my urban shooting is really more rural. Like I said, lots of farms and fields here, nothing in the way of interesting urban architecture. There isn't even a city here. But the rural landscape can look quite interesting, and there's certainly a lot of history here. So there's a lot of historic buildings, old farms, old sheds, old farmhouses, and that kind of thing. You know, we live in fairly modern houses here too, but with kind of the pioneer mindset that settled this area. There's definitely a lot of older buildings, some still in great shape, others not so much, but they make really great subjects, right? But that got me inspired to start trying to shoot with the creative dial. Of course, I've had some experience with it with the Pen F, and so I knew what it was all about, but hadn't shot with it in quite some time. So it was a great refresher and a great experience with this. I absolutely love shooting with the creative dial, and I decided to start with the art filters. So this is an old museum that we've got. This is about a 2-minute walk from my house, and I decided I would use this location for a lot of my test shooting as I was going through some of these various features on the creative dial because it was easily accessible, it was close to me, and it was an interesting enough building that I thought the images would end up looking pretty decent. So I thought I would start with the art filters. So click and you turn to the art filters there. And when you do that, what you see through the viewfinder or on the LCD is this overlay. And so if we start at the top left, it says that I'm in Art 1.1 there, because there are two art filters that fall under the first heading. And then it also has various effects that you can add to it. I'm not going to go into those effects in much detail. And then along the bottom, you have a variety of different art filters that you can apply. I counted them up in total. I think there's 31 different art filters. Now, I'm not going to show all of them to you. The first two that pop up are the pop art filters. This is what pop art looks like. And basically, it's hypersaturates the image. That can be a really cool look to it. If you find that a little bit too much, then the pop art 2 is definitely a little grungier looking. And I really do like this look here. Right. And so if we go through a few of the other ones, this is what soft focus looks like. The grainy film is very cool black and white treatment that you go through. The pinhole, which adds a very strong vignette to the shot, and there's a number of different pinhole variations. If you used to do some cross processing in the darkroom, this gives you that effect here. A sepia tone. And a vintage. One of my favorites to use are the various, I think there's 4 vintage filters that you can add. Now, the cool thing, of course, is that you get this image recorded to the card, but you also have the RAW. Assuming that you've set your camera up to shoot in RAW, you get both. So you've got this as a JPEG, and then you've also got the RAW image that you can use in post later. I think of this as pre-processing the shot, and it gives me versions of an image that I might not otherwise think of. One of the presentations that I do quite regularly to various camera clubs on the continent is one called Seeing Differently, and I often talk about how you can see differently through your post-processing. Well, with this camera, I can see differently through my pre-processing. being able to see a shot before I've even clicked the shutter and how it might look. And I love that. Now, once you've chosen one of those art filters, the little overlay menu disappears, right? If you want to now go back and change whatever art filter you're using, it's very easy to do that. All you have to do is click the OK button, and then you get the Super Control panel popping up. And you can clearly see that at the moment I've dialed in the 16th art filter, and it's called Instant Film. And so I can just scroll through those. And of course, this would also be just an overlay. I don't have it showing that way right here. And so you could see what that art filter does to your image. And so if I wanted to see what instant film looks like, boom, there you have it, right? So there's 31 different art filters. Some of them are over the top. Some of them are actually quite nice looking, but they're all quite unique. All right, my favorite art filter by far is the one I'm about to apply to this image, the selective color. And so when I was photographing this scene, of course, in the winter, that red barn pops quite a bit. I wanted to make it pop even more, so I dialed up the uh, selective color. I turned the color wheel to red, and so only the red elements in this photograph show up, and everything else turns into a monochrome, a black and white image. And so there isn't a huge difference between those two shots because it's a winter scene. I think you can definitely see a difference between the former shot and this one. But I do like using that. So here's an example of one that's definitely a little more obvious as to how this would change the look of the image. But I came across this wall of paint can lids. So all of those colored dots are paint can lids for a giant mural that you're going to see in a minute. And so they just staple or nailed them onto this exterior wall. And I thought, well, this would be the perfect situation to use the selective color. And so you pop it up, you just go to that art filter, and I've now got yellow here. So of course it's not just yellow, it's kind of all in the yellowish hue, the reds and oranges here, the purples, blues, cyan, and green. It might take you a moment to even see the green because there weren't a lot of green paint can lids, but very easy to adjust that and get this selective color one. Of course, for me, I think it truly was the red one that I like. I think I like the red one better than the full multicolor one. All right. So now it's time to head to the city. The city is a little over 2 hours away from where I live, and the only way to get there at this time of the year is to cross this old bridge. This is over 100 years old. It's a single lane bridge. It's a swing bridge. It swings in the summer to let the boat traffic. And of course, I definitely had to photograph it at a sunrise, and it was a spectacular sunrise. Looks like I wasn't the only one heading off to the city. Now, the challenge, of course, in a city of just about 100,000 people, there aren't a lot of interesting architectural features there, but I tried my best to photograph a few things here and use the soft focus filter on this one. This is the same structure. This is called the grotto, and it's a nice little spot to sit and reflect and to have a picnic lunch and that kind of thing. And in this case, nothing applied to the shot, but I decided to use the 8mm fisheye, one of my favorite lenses, to make it look a little different here, to see it a little differently. Right now, those paint can lids all came into being because of this. This is probably the most interesting architectural feature in this city. The city's name is Sudbury, and this used to be the General Hospital. One of my kids was born in this hospital many, many years ago, but when it closed down because a new hospital had been built, the owners decided that they would put it in, they were going to turn it into apartments. But they needed to get all the permits lined up, and so prior to all of that, all of the red tape uh, going away, they teamed up with Monster Energy, the drink company, and they decided to turn it into this giant mural. This is Canada's largest mural. It's very bright. I love it, but there's a lot of people in that city who can't stand it because it is so big and so well seen. And unfortunately, over the years, there's been broken windows, and I don't think they're going to turn it into apartments. But as a photographer, it's a great subject. I absolutely love uh, photographing it. Right at night, I went to the local water tower, which they light up. And so just a handheld shot with that beautiful 25 millimeter f1.8 lens. And then as I was shooting this, I looked behind me and the moon was still up in the sky. It was just beginning to rise and it was a beautiful crescent moon. So I took this shot and then I switched to the 40 to 150 f4 and I used the multiple exposure feature and boom, I could grab the moon and put it where I want. So just a simple multiple exposure here. And again, just use that CP button. And then this water tower also, they have the colors cycle over the course of the night. And so I decide I like the blue and or the red and the green. I do know my colors. But at one point it turned purple and I decided to use the multiple exposure for that as well. All right. I love shooting urban landscapes, cityscapes, that kind of thing. It time to try to do some street shooting under severe winter conditions. I picked the wrong day maybe, or maybe it was the right day because in the end I got some shots that I was quite happy with. Um, Right, this is a fisheye lens through a tunnel that's basically just a converted culvert here, and I love the look. That's my wife and my dog walking through there. And then I headed to the waterfront to see what I could capture there, because I wanted to capture some people doing whatever they might be doing down at the waterfront. And so I caught this jogger with her dog, and you could see the snow really started to pick up. People skating out on this ice path that we have. And then the snow really picked up. Caught this couple playing with their dog. And I can attest to just how rugged this camera is. It can handle heavy snow, and I've had it under extreme cold. I've had it out in -20 for quite some time, and it handled it no problem. I haven't had it out in the rain yet because there hasn't been any rain. It's been much too cold for that. But I know, having shot with all of the other camera gear, that this can handle almost anything that you can throw at it. Now, I'm also definitely an outdoor enthusiast. Like, I love outdoor activities. I do a fair amount of skiing and snowshoeing and that kind of thing. And my wife and I went and did some fat biking on this trail. If you're not familiar with fat biking, it's biking on snow with balloon tires so that you don't sink right in the snow like you would with narrower tires. And I just threw the camera in my pack. It was rattling around in the pack. I just had the 25 millimeter lens on it, and it was a great lens to shoot, even rapid fire with, using the 6 frames per second, click, 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 getting a bunch of shots that way. All right. So it is a great outdoors camera. It can handle all sorts of weather conditions, a great street shooter. Now on to something else that I really like to shoot. As a landscape photographer, I often think big picture. I want to get the grand landscape, but sometimes that's not the best thing to shoot. And I will focus on sort of more detail-oriented shots, fill the frame with something, and pull out some of the details. And I've done that both locally here, and also when I was in the city. So obviously this is a local shot. This is a trail that I like to hike on, and I just got in really, really close to this tree. I wanted to see what the 25 millimeter lens would be like if I got in really close and then just used the aperture wide open, right? So shot at f1.8, and I love the soft bokeh that I got there. That's me, so I had to use the interval shooting again, right? And then, of course, you've seen this, but what caught my eye more than the actual water tower itself was a detail shot that required me to switch to the 40 to 150, which I loved using. And so I was able to zoom in here and just capture the stairs as they wrapped around the center column of this water tower, right? When I was photographing this sawmill, this is an old historic sawmill, it doesn't work anymore, but it's still around. I found the light to be a little too soft on this particular day, and so to bump up the look of this, I just went into the Pop Art 2 art filter, and this would be pretty darn close to the way I would have post-processed it anyway, even if I was just using the raw image, right? This, I don't know if this is a giant oil tank or what it was storing at one point, but what caught my eye, of course, was the color, but also the repeating pattern of the steps, and more importantly, the interesting shadow. And then after shooting this, I switched to the grainy film art filter and captured that, and created a completely different look to it. Right. And then I could not help but overemphasize the color in this fence. So this is somebody who has this fence. I think there must be about 10 bicycles, all multicolored, that are just sitting there on this person's yard. And I just got in close with that 40 to 150 and used that pop art filter again. This is I don't know if you can tell exactly what you're looking at. It might take you a moment, but we've got a wood carver here, lives on the other side of the island, and I used one of the vintage art filters to get a close-up of the predator. So this is a wood carving of the predator, obviously covered in snow there, right? So I love doing detail shots, especially in the city. And so I definitely had some fun with that, particularly with that 40 to 150. All right. So, the other thing that I liked, I've always liked doing this, but this camera has re-inspired me to try doing a few little experiments. Used to love doing experimental stuff, and over the years I kind of put that aside, and this camera is just so fun to work with that I decided to do it again. So this obviously isn't an experiment. I just wanted to do some macro shooting with it. And of course, it's winter, but I did have a Gerbera daisy that I had uprooted from my garden, brought it in, and it kept blooming all winter long. And so I got in close with my macro lens and then decided to do a little bit of water droplet photography with it. And so used that macro lens to do a sort of a water droplet experiment here. And then yesterday I went out and did a little bit of experimenting. It was so freaking cold here yesterday that I thought I'm going to do some frozen bubbles. So I mixed up a solution and went outside, and it was minus 20 as the sun was rising, and did some frozen bubbles. And if you look carefully in that in the center of that bubble, you'll see a reflection of the camera. And I spent about a half an hour outside in the brutal cold, and the camera handled it no trouble at all. And all of these are handheld. I didn't set up a tripod. I was able to manage it quite well, even with thicker gloves on. No problem at all. Okay, so now I want to move on to something else on that creative dial, something I use far more than the art filters, and that are those mono profiles. I absolutely love it. Maybe some of you are like me and had your start in black and white film. At one point, of course, I just had to send it away, but as I got older, I did have my own little dark room that I could do some black and white processing with. And so I have a real affinity for black and white photography. So I'm back at this old museum. Now it's time to try some monochrome. So you go to the creative dial, switch it over to mono, and there are 4 mono profiles, right? You can see those across the bottom, and each one can be customized however you would like to do it. Right. So this is the default setting for Mono 1. I'll get into the customization in a minute, but that's what Mono 1 looks like for that scene. This is Mono 2, definitely more contrasty, grainier, right? Mono 3 and Mono 4. So this is what sort of a side-by-side of all of those different mono settings. But like I said, you can customize them in a number of different ways. So let's have a quick look at some of those. I won't show you the end results of these customizations because there's so many of them. But as far as what you can do, firstly, you can apply a color filter to it. Just like in the old days where you'd stick a glass colored filter in front of your lens, well, you can apply that digitally here. So you can choose yellow or blue, whatever, green, to make certain colors pop more in your black and white. You can apply a tone curve to bring up the highlights or the darken the shadows, whatever you'd like to do there. You can apply a shading effect as well. The idea of the shading effect might be somewhat confusing. All it is a vignette, right? So it applies a darker vignette if you move the slider to the left, and a lighter vignette if you go to the right. You can adjust the sharpness as well, bump up the sharpness or lower the sharpness. You can do the same thing with the contrast, increase the contrast, decrease the contrast. You can apply that film grain effect if you would like to give it sort of an older look to it. And if you're tired of shooting in a neutral sort of black and white, you can apply a sepia tone, a blue color, a purple or a green tone, sort of a color cast or color wash to your image. Right, so lots of different variations that you can come up with. And so over the last few weeks, I've definitely been playing with the various monotone settings, done a few adjustments. Often I would just use the settings as they were in the camera, but given that I have lots of older farmhouses and stuff to shoot, it seemed to be quite appropriate. Also did a little bit of detail shooting. That's actually just a doorknob in my house because I live in a 140-year-old house, and have these antique doorknobs which look kind of interesting. These are some ruins where the roof had caved in years ago, but the ruins still stand, and I thought they looked perfect in black and white. Right. This is probably my favorite one. I know it's more of a landscape kind of thing, but winter can be a great time to play with the monochrome settings here. The other really great thing about the mono settings is that you can use them in conjunction with the computational photography stuff. So if you look at the water in that stream, I've obviously got that silky look. That's not because I used a sort of a longer exposure just by changing the shutter speed. That's using Live ND. So I love the fact that I can use any of those features on the creative dial with the computational features. And so I love doing that. Live ND is perfect for a situation like that. I also used Live ND for something like this. I did some intentional camera movement here, right? Just used Live ND to get that longer exposure, and just wiggled the camera up and down, and that was using one of the mono settings. I think this was mono 1, but of course I still get the raw image as well if I wanted to use the color version instead. Right, in this case, I use the Live GND, and just so that you kind of get a sense of where I live and what winter is like, that is the south shore of the island on which I live, and we're starting to get these bigger ice features forming. There's even ice caves and ice arches forming as well here. And so with Live GND, I can shoot a monochrome, but also treat it as I would a regular landscape shot. All right. So there are color profiles as well. If you switch the dial all the way over to the, I suppose it would be the left if you're holding the camera. You've got it's the right. If you're holding it left here, you've got the color profiles. There's 4 of those as well. I'm not going to go into detail with these, but there are 4 color profiles. And if you look at them carefully, you can see some differences between them, more or less saturation, more or less contrast. And all of these can be adjusted as well. I have to admit, I don't use these nearly as much as the mono because I like black and white, but they are there and they're fully customizable as well. Now, the last feature on the creative dial, and again, I don't use this a lot, but there are times where it really comes in handy, and that is the color creator. That's the CRT setting that you see there on the dial. When I see a sunset or a sunrise like this one, I think, okay, well, I'd really like to bump up the color here a little bit. There aren't enough clouds. I don't really like sunrises or sunsets where there's no clouds. And that was the situation that I was facing in this case. So I went into the color creator, and it has a color dial similar to the one that we just saw with the monochrome. And it allows me to choose basically what I'm calling a color wash. I'm not too sure what OM system calls it, but I can dial in whatever color I would like to apply here, and then I can also decide on the intensity. I can have it, a low intensity or low vivid color, or really vivid, higher saturation of that color. And then this is kind of what you end up with. And I like the look on occasion, and I don't want to overdo it. Here's the side by side. you may like it, you may not, but remember you've got the raw image as well. And so over the last few weeks, I have actually used this on a few occasions. This is one that I shot a couple of weeks ago when I was out shooting the sunset, and I love this shot. And when I posted this on Facebook, most of my followers did as well. Right, but this is using the color creator, and for this shot, this was I think a 4 or 5 shot pano. So I just held the camera vertically and shot across um, in order to capture this image and applied the color creator to it, and I think it looks natural. I love the look on it. On another day last week, I was out wanting to capture the sunrise, and again, the clouds that I thought were going to be there kind of faded away as the sun was peaking. And I am not against trying to create an image a little bit differently than most people. I brought a prop with me, so that window is one that I carried out of my garage. I hiked way out onto the ice. I probably hiked almost a kilometer out onto the ice to get to this spot. Um, and then plopped the window into the snow and used it as a foreground feature. But in order to make it look a little bit more interesting, I used the color creator, right? So now I am not a video shooter. I rarely ever shoot video, and when I do, um, I just use the default settings that are in the OM system cameras, and I find those default settings great for almost every situation. So, but I did want to at least try one video feature with this camera, and that was the S&Q feature, right? So on the camera, you can use that video stills dial there on the left, and I decided, well, I'm going to switch to S&Q, which is slow and quick motion. Quick motion, of course, is like hyperlapses, time lapses that speed up, slower moving things, right? I wanted to try the slow motion, and so I did that with some water droplets. So I've got a short little video clip. I think it's 25 seconds long. And the first 4 or 5 seconds are the water droplets at regular speed. So I just turned it to the regular video setting and shot a few seconds of these water droplets. Then I tried the slow mo and blended those in together. And so here is a video using both of those features. It's about 25 seconds or so. All right, so with that slow-mo version, you're getting up to 240 frames per second, and that's at full HD. So what is that? 1080 by 1920, I think it is, right? So you're still getting really good, high quality video. You don't get any sound with it, so it's not going to record any sound at that. But I love that. I'm definitely going to be trying more of that. But I thought I'd at least experiment with it so I could show you that feature here. All right. So as I wrap up, I definitely have a few thoughts on this camera. First of all, I love it. It has inspired me to experiment a little bit more, to try different things. Photography's got to be fun. I truly believe in that. You have to be able to, like, when I go out, I will often say to my wife, okay, I'm going out to play right now. And I mean, I'm going out to shoot because as much as I take my images seriously, I want to have fun with my photography, and this is a fun camera to shoot with. And so I really enjoyed it. It's rugged. It feels good in the hand. I also want to talk about a few of the lenses that I've been shooting with over the last few weeks. Of course, I've mentioned a number of them that I've used already. The 17 is awesome. This is the new 17, the newest version. It's weather sealed, right? You can see splash proof on it, so it works really well with the new OM-3, as does the 25 millimeter lens. These are great. And I think, they came out at the same time because they are great street shooting, urban style lenses, but they're certainly not the only lenses that I've used. When I needed a slightly wider view, I threw on the 12 millimeter f2. That is the 12 millimeter that we've had for quite some time. Still a fantastic lens. I've used that for many, many astro shots. Right. And then I developed a love affair with a lens that I wasn't giving much love to. I've had the newer 40 to 150 for quite some time, but I wasn't really using it much. I absolutely loved the older 40 to 150 f2, but the way this one feels with the OM-3 is fantastic. It's really nicely balanced in the hand. It's a light lens, but still a very high quality pro level lens. Right. Of course, I don't go anywhere without my 8 to 25. So anytime I was doing these sort of classic landscape shots, I would put that lens on because I absolutely love that lens. Right. But I also threw on, shot on a number of occasions with the fisheye, which gives a unique look and a 180-degree field of view. So there is one lens that OM System released at the same time, the 100 to 400, and I was actually told that, don't worry about photographing anything with that lens and the OM-3. If we've sent you that lens, use the OM-1 Mark II with it to get your images. And so, at first, that's what I did. But I fell in love with the OM-3 so much that I started leaving the OM-1 behind, the OM-1 Mark II. And so last week, when I was out shooting, I was out on the ice on that morning when I photographed that sunrise through the window. And I had my OM-3 with me. I was shooting, I think that shot was with the 8 to 25. And then as I'm traipsing across the ice, I look behind me and the full moon is setting. And I didn't realize that that's what it was going to do. And so I thought, oh my gosh, it looks beautiful. I need to photograph that. But of course, the 8 to 25 wasn't going to do it justice. I had the 100 to 400 with me because it's light enough, it's small enough, it's compact enough that I can throw it in my bag and it doesn't weigh me down. So I strapped it on and ended up with this shot. And thank goodness I had it with me. Probably one of my favorite shots that I've captured in some time. And it just so happened that a raven landed on the top of that one spruce tree while I was photographing it. So, it does work incredibly well with that OM-3. Mike and I were talking about it a little while ago. Some people, when you look at the front, you think, oh, well, there's no grip to it. Well, there's a thumb grip at the back, and it is ample. At no point have I ever felt that I was, going to lose grip of it, either with the longer lens or when I was extending myself, holding the camera way up high, holding it down low. It felt just fine with that, right? So, last thing I want to talk about. Is this camera suitable for every shooting situation? Well, there are people who would say, well, there's no camera that's suitable for every shooting situation. And I don't know if I can argue with that point, but practically speaking, I don't know if there's anything that I wouldn't shoot with this, right? Whether it's landscapes or detail shots or macro shooting, urbans, street photography, that kind of thing. I'd shoot all of those. I suppose the one thing that some people would think, I'm probably not going to shoot wildlife with it. And it's definitely not probably going to be my first wildlife shooter, first choice for a wildlife shooter, because it does kind of lack that big beefy grip. But in a pinch, it can absolutely shoot wildlife. So these are some birds that were at my bird feeder last week. And then when I was out shooting on the South Shore, also last week, I'm heading back. I had about a 2 kilometer snowshoe to get back to my vehicle. And then boom, what do you know? There's a snowy owl right there. And I did not have my OM-1 Mark II with me, but I did have that 100 to 400. And boom, I struck it rich with a beautiful shot of this female snowy owl. Right, so it really is quite a capable camera that you can shoot almost anything with. All right, with that, I want to thank again Adorama. I want to thank Mike for I'm sure he's been frantically typing questions out there. If you guys have any other questions, feel free. I have no secrets about this, and I'll try to do my best. But any technical stuff, I'm sure Mike will be able to answer. I'm going to stop the share and let Mike
Hey,
pipe in
Peter.
here.
Yeah, I mean,
Hey,
we really didn't. I got through the questions. Thanks for a great presentation again. once again. I wanted to mention and add what you just said about the wildlife. One thing I was noticing this weekend in looking at the camera is having that same menu and everything as the OM-1. When you take that lens off, it's flat. So it's a great camera to just throw in your bag as a second
Yep.
body
Yeah.
as well. It's very
Yeah.
capable. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I just want to say that we have the pre-orders going now on the camera and the lenses, and they're good until the 27th of the month, which is when these will be available. The 100 to 400 will be available the 25th of March, but the others, the 17, 25, and OM-3 body will be available the 27th. If you want to pre-order, the body is 19.99. There is a kit available with a 12 to 45 f4 Pro, which is a great little lens for a nice kind of wide angle to portrait. And there's also a bundle offer that we have. If you pre-order by the 27th and you want to have the body only and pick one of the new primes, either the 25 or the 17, you get $200 off. So it's a great little promo that we're running, and that can be found online at Adorama under Create Your Own Bundle. So there is a way to do that online there and do it by the 27th. So thanks, Peter. I
Yeah.
appreciate another great presentation.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike. And
All
thanks to
right.
everybody who watched. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Take
You guys have a
care.
great night. All right. Take care, everybody.